Hello and welcome to Analyst Insights, GigaOm Radar for Patch Management, presented by Syxsense and GigaOm. Your speakers today are Ashley Leonard, CEO of Syxsense, and Howard Holton, CTO of GigaOm. If you have questions along the way, use the chat feature at the bottom of your screen and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. Thank you for being here. And now, here's Ashley Leonard.
Hello, nice to see everyone joining us today for our webinar. As we explained, we're joined here by Howard Holton from GigaOm. For those of you that are not familiar with Syxsense, Syxsense is a global leader in unified security and endpoint management. We are headquartered in Southern California, but have offices around the world. As we mentioned, my name is Ashley Leonard. I'm President and CEO of Syxsense, and very excited to be joined today by Howard. Howard, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I'm the CTO of GigaOm as well as an executive analyst. I've spent the last 6 months at GigaOm. Before that, I spent 17 years as various C-level roles in various organizations, right? CIO, CISO, and CTO mostly. I was CTO of Hitachi Vantara as a name that you might recognize. I've done industrial manufacturing, telecom, healthcare, retail, automotive, legal services, law enforcement. My background is wild and varied. And I came to the analyst role really to help customers better understand how to communicate with the executive suite and find alignment, as well as to help executives with their kind of strategic design and planning.
For those that are not familiar with GigaOm, could you tell us a little bit about the organization? Because I know its approach is a little different than some of the other analyst organizations that are out there.
Oh, it absolutely is. So GigaOm, what makes GigaOm unique amongst analyst organizations is it's engineering led. And that's a strange thing for an analyst organization. All of our analysts that report on tech topics work in the industry using those tech topics, those technical tools as part of their day-to-day lives, right? So if I have someone writing on DevOps, they are a DevOps engineer. And it gives us a very, very different perspective in how we write, how we report, and the things that we look for. As an example, right? I think everyone's familiar with some other analyst firms' Magic Quadrant, right? The Magic Quadrant is problematic for me as a buyer because it doesn't really, it's a light switch situation and it doesn't really contain any nuance. You're either in the Magic Quadrant or you're out of the Magic Quadrant, right? And so it's not really good for me for making a decision. Additionally, they consider things we don't consider. We don't look at the company itself. We look at the product and product development. We don't look at market share. We look at product and product development, right? No one's too big to be acquired. And so looking at market share isn't helpful when trying to determine what products are great. And then because we're engineers, we like nuance. I'm happy if someone is currently thinking in their head, you may like nuance too much. I'm okay with that, right? But nuance gives us the ability to really deliver some value that we find to be unique. So this picture that you see before us is what we call the radar. It is our version of the Magic Quadrant. The kind of nexus of it is perfect is dead center in that kind of white area. You'll never see anybody in the white area because we don't believe perfection can be attained. If someone actually wants to challenge that, they're welcome to do so. It requires laying off your entire product development force. And so far, no one's taken us up on that particular challenge. And so what we kind of figure is there's an X and Y axis within every space. And the X and Y axis goes from feature play, those that are targeting kind of the 20th percentile solutions as their main focus, and platform play, those that are really going after the broader 80th percentile. That's a pretty straightforward definition. We don't have a lot of trouble there. Then you have maturity versus innovation. And it's important to understand, especially as you get closer and closer and closer to the center, those on the mature side are not lacking in innovation, but what they are doing is refining an existing platform. And so it is very likely that I'm not going to see massive changes over the course of 3 years, but I'm going to see evolution over the course of 3 years. my expectation on the innovation scale, especially as we get closer and closer to the bottom, is they're going to make rapid, large changes. And over the course of the contract, I'm likely to end up with a product that isn't where I started, right? In some cases, that's very, very, very good. In some cases, it's not.
If you were evaluating a patch management solution at the moment, how would you use the radar to select the vendors that you might want to shortlist?
Sure. So the first thing that I do is I look at the topic itself. Patch management's pretty core to IT operations, right? I don't have a lot of room to kind of muck about, and I don't really. I'm pretty risk averse when it comes to patch management. As a matter of fact, my risk aversion is likely what puts me into a decision framework today. And so that should immediately tell everybody what quadrant I'm really going to be looking at, right? It's far more likely that I'm going to be in the platform play side because I need a complete solution, or as complete as I can possibly get. And I'm going to be looking for someone who's mature and as close to the center as possible, right? So it's important to understand this isn't a decision document. This is a kind of a short list document. And what I'm trying to do is figure out who do I then need to talk to. And so in this case, I talked to SecPod, Syxsense, Avanti, Tanium, and BMC. And I would likely add a filter of my own personal experience with individual vendors to exclude, one or two.
Totally makes sense. Obviously, with your experience of being CTO of some very large organizations, what do you think people should be considering most important when evaluating solutions today?
So within the context of patch management, endpoint management, one of the things that we do when we're coming up with all of our radars is we look for what are the key technical criteria. We call them the key criteria that every product kind of needs to focus on. Those are kind of core product features that the markets demand and customers demand. Some of it is driven by where vendors are investing, but very, very, very little of it. We are happy to tell vendors, we don't understand why you're investing there, right? We then go, okay, so how many of these are table stakes? And we move those to a column called table stakes. So if you see one of our radars and someone's not on it, there's a decent chance they don't meet the table stakes. Then we say, okay, so there are some things that are always going to be forward-looking and not really key criteria to decisions, but things you should be aware of. And we list those as emerging technologies, right? So those are kind of the hard metrics that we use. And then we have what you might consider the soft metrics. And the soft metrics are what we call our evaluation metrics. And these tend to be the things that customers really want to focus in on because they're the things that make a big difference inside an organization, right? They tend to be the kind of decision triggers that you have. My last tool wasn't flexible. I need a tool that's flexible. I didn't like the security. Maybe within patch management, maybe they weren't highly considerate of security as a feature. So I need to look for that. Usability, patch reporting, right? You can kind of see what they're looking at. And then within the individual product domain, we have things like patch coverage, which would be unique to patch management. Not to say these particular criteria wouldn't exist elsewhere, but they are particularly important in patch management. And it allows us it allows us to review using the lens of a customer. If we were to buy, what are the things that would be important? And then allows you to kind of down select. I do have to say, it's very rare that I see all threes across the board because this is only a scale of 1 to 3. There's no 4 or 5. And so you scored superior within, or exceptional, sorry, within each one of these, which is pretty rare. So good job, guys.
Well, thank you. We like to think that we certainly innovate and lead the market in this area. And as a vendor, Syxsense has really become a leader in unified security and endpoint management. And I wanted to ask you, Howard, what do you see as some of the benefits for customers when they're considering patch management technology of unifying both management, patch, and security together into a single solution?
At this point, I'm starting to see it as kind of mandatory, right? I need to get a picture of the health of my devices. And the only other way to do it is to blend that health. I care far less, right, from the kind of executive seat. I actually care far less about the utilization of the box, right? That there's health that is the utilization of the box. I care far more about the health posture of all of my devices, right? I care far more about, are they patched? Are they updated? Is something critical waiting? When we've missed something, what have we missed? And how does that change my risk profile? Risk profiling is a huge piece of conversation in the executive suite. And as CISO, it's now become a board conversation, right? Boards have changed from, please don't let this convince us this won't happen to us, to when it happens, because we know it's going to happen, how bad will it be? Right. And that's changed the conversations we have in the boardroom. And a big one is really, what is the state of patching, right? My expectation is I get a kind of constant update on our state of patching and what the plan is for remediation.
I know that you're a strong believer in the strength of reporting when it comes to patch management. Do you have any kind of comments on that from if you're evaluating technology at the moment?
Yeah, if the reporting isn't perfect, I need to pick a different product. Right? Like honestly, that's where I spend all of my time. Right. And the more unified that the tool is able to be, the more pieces it touches, the more valuable the reporting really is, right? Especially when we start looking at patching things that are not just the traditional things we cover, but rather getting into, hardware devices, or getting out into, into the OT side of the house, or even into the customer, into the field, right? As we start to patch IoT devices. I would sacrifice most everything else on this list for patch reporting. Because ultimately, if the flexibility is really good, but I can't see the value of the flexibility in the reporting, I'm still ultimately losing at the end of it, right? And that ability to report out into the business and up through the organization has become so critical and so important that it almost doesn't matter if I don't have visibility to it.
Yeah, absolutely. We often hear from our customers that some of the other products that are out in the marketplace produce these very complex lists of vulnerabilities, but it's almost unintelligible. And for us, I think it's important not only just to be able to produce the reports, but turn those into actionable insights so that you can actually help secure your environment. Automation. That's becoming a kind of buzzword we're hearing a lot in industry. At Syxsense, we've invested a lot in Syxsense Cortex technology, which is an automation engine that allows our customers to be able to build complex patch and remediation cycles using a drag and drop interface. With the challenges in the economy and the kind of ever-increasing demands on IT departments, IT is being asked to do more with the same, or in some cases even less people. Intrigued to hear what your thoughts are on automation and how important that is, you're seeing from GigaOm in the industry.
So automation is, I don't want to say it's a key buzzword, because I don't believe it's a buzzword. We're executing against automation as an industry very, very well, which makes it not a buzzword, but it is a very, very, very common topic of conversation. And the reality is, all tool makers really need to be focused on, how do I automate? Simply because so much of the executive conversation is around people. It's probably the number one topic. I have an interesting story. I go to a lot of like customer councils. I go to a lot of executive end user meetings, and I'm at a meeting with a security company, and they had brought in the CISO from Amazon as the kind of marquee customer. And the CISO from Amazon just kind of said, ask me any question that you want. I'm happy to answer it. I'll be an open book in this room. To which I was a little bit cheeky, but I said, cool. I'm not sure how you are valuable to us, considering the budget of your department individually is greater than the global annual turnover of any of our companies. However, what I'd really like to know is, you got any tips to hire and retain people? Because that's my biggest challenge. And the entire room exploded, not at my first comment, but at my second. Oh my God, yes. What are you guys doing to hire? Oh, I can't hire people either. What are you doing to hire? Right. And so we're really in this space where I'm always being asked to do more with less, but people have moved to the C-suite as a primary piece of conversation, and we're all having it. So anything that you can do to do two things: one, reduce the load on my people, and two, increase the satisfaction in their day-to-day work. It's why reporting is so important. The better the reporting is, the less time my people are spending putting stuff together that I can take to the board. Automation falls in exactly the same place, right? The less time people are spend setting up patch deployment, setting up patch management, right? The more time they spend working in the business and really maintaining as close as they can to a 40-hour work week, the happier they are, which means the happier I am.
Yeah, absolutely. Another area that we've been working with is AI, and tying that to automation. I'm intrigued to hear what your thoughts are on how AI is going to impact the space.
Artificial intelligence as a concept and it has been a key place of investment. And I think used properly, right? AI needs to solve incredibly complex things where the goal isn't 100% accuracy, because AI is not really 100% accurate today. Applied to the right problem to get the right answer, AI can be an absolute brilliant thing to use. And ultimately, we're not hitting 100% accuracy in patch management. So if we can leverage AI to start to move that needle, if we can leverage AI to start to prioritize tasks, if we can use AI to say, hey, something changed here that put us in a more beneficial position or a less beneficial position, and start to automate the tuning of the dials, right? I think that's a fantastic place for AI to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that we've noticed, Howard, is that if you look at individual vulnerabilities, when you use traditional scoring systems like CVE scores on their own, that gives you kind of a limited picture of the vulnerability risk that your organization might have. But when you put multiple vulnerabilities together, then the complete security picture changes. So it's more than just looking at an individual CVE score to make a decision about how you prioritize patching. I think that for us, that's where AI really can become incredibly powerful for us and to help our customers.
Oh, I agree completely. I think CVE scores are useful, but have to still be put through the lens of kind of your organization, right? I can't tell you the number of times the highest scored, the highest scored thing was also the least impactful, right? And yet generated the most effort. Yet without the nuance of my organization, without the nuance of my configuration, without the nuance of kind of the total picture, the CVE score by itself had far, far less value.
Absolutely. Yeah, what we've done at Syxsense is we've created a concept called the Syx score that extends beyond just CVE to help companies prioritize how they should go about patching their organization because of those nuances. Today's IT environments kind of keeps changing, and obviously I think most companies have got some form of patching in place for their desktop systems, probably their servers as well, but there are other systems beyond that nowadays. I'm intrigued to hear kind of how, or has that been considered in the GigaOm report on patch management, that there's kind of more than kind of PCs and servers nowadays?
So it is not part of the key criteria today. It will absolutely be key criteria next year, right? Because it is a change that we're seeing in the space. It is a change we're seeing in the industry. And it is something that as both users and our customers are looking at and saying, hey, we need to really manage this. I will tell you, coming from a global industrial manufacturing company, we're at 100,000 devices deployed as IoT devices. Firmware management is a key problem within the IoT space, right? And having to manage it in its own interface with its own reporting, it really is not going to be scalable, right? And so it's going to be a key feature moving forward. especially as that becomes more and more and more popular. Rather than an industry conversation, it becomes more of a kind of worldwide conversation. We all know, I think I don't remember if I think it was Home Depot hack that came in through the fire control system or the fire alarm, right?
It was the Target one, wasn't it? Maybe I can't. Yeah,
it might have been Target. Yeah, I can never.
There's been multiple, right?
Remember which one it was? Yeah, there've been too many, and I think that one's probably a decade ago. But it really doesn't underscore the value in managing all of these IoT devices. And I got to tell you, right, the ability to find all the IoT devices is probably going to be equally important as we move forward, right? The number of devices managed by third parties that are IoT devices that we may or may not be made aware of, especially within the kind of physical security space, are problematic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking a little bit about how companies are bringing patch management technologies into their organization. Normally, you're integrating into other technologies that are in use within a corporate environment today. Just intrigued to hear kind of what your thoughts about kind of some of the most important things that companies should be thinking about when selecting a technology for patching their devices when it comes to that integration.
Ease of integration is a very important one. Also, kind of the library of existing integrations, right? Most patch management allows you to kind of roll your own for patch management of systems that it's not overly familiar with, but in reality, all that does is create more work. And so one of the things that I look for is, how many integrations does the company support out of the box? How easy are those integrations? And then if I do need to do integrations, what does that support look like? Right? Am I on my own for that? Do they have a robust network? Do they have training? And can I get a person on the keyboard to give me a hand? Right? Kind of all those things are what I look at. The person on the keyboard is less important than the library ultimately. Right. And so generally when I get to the conversation stage and especially before we even get to the POC stage, I kind of have my top 200 apps laid out. And really all of Microsoft is one app. All of Oracle is one app. All of SAP is one app, because I'm going to assume you do a really good job with the big three. Right. But as we look to the others, right, I want to have that laid out and be able to kind of walk through a checklist. Hey, okay, how am I going to handle patching these things? Maybe not applications, right? Systems, hardware, the kind of a nice sample set across the organization that I can deliver to each of the companies I'm talking to say, okay, what am I going to do? How do I manage these within your system? Is this, kind of tier 1, we handle it ourselves. Tier 2, there's a little bit of work. Tier 3, you're on, you're kind of on your own, you're rolling an integration. And that helps me to kind of do that evaluation. It also gives me a good idea of, how much do they care about me as a customer, which makes a big difference.
With COVID receding nowadays, we're seeing a lot of customers with hybrid work environments, which has created a whole new set of challenges for companies. Intrigued to kind of hear what your feeling is around kind of how patch management needs to change to evolve with today's work environments.
Well, I mean, the bad news for those listening is it's not going to get easier. Right? If anybody thought, hey, this return to work means it's going to be easier, it's not. Because most companies are having to support a hybrid work environment, right? They're having to support some continuous work from home. So where we went from a relatively small number of networks before, and then COVID hit and we went to all of the networks, right? If we had 10,000 employees, we likely had 10,000 networks. And that made patch management difficult. It's not going to be easier as people start to come back into the office, right? Obviously, that has its own series of concerns, right? Hybrid work and bringing devices back and forth from a trusted to untrusted network has its own challenges.
Yeah. Back in the summer, Syxsense announced zero trust access capabilities, where our Cortex technology, Joe mentioned earlier, can actually look at the current security state of an endpoint as well as where it's actually connected, and then make decisions about whether an endpoint can actually be used to allow access to secure resources. So we're actually taking the status, which includes the patch status of an endpoint, and then using that data to make decisions around whether that endpoint is trusted and therefore, for example, can access the financial system. So we're kind of progressing patch management beyond just kind of traditional, how do we get the device patched, but use it to make those real-time decisions. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love it. I was a big fan of NAC kind of back in the day. Like as an idea, I thought it really didn't get kind of the focus it deserved. And part of the problem was it was really complicated to deploy, complicated to run, and it was just this other system that we ran. I think it's really smart to integrate that into your patch management framework because it's kind of the logical place that I want it anyhow. So I'm really excited to hear that. Really excited to see that.
Yeah, it's been great to see some of the reception we've had from this, because it is an easy way to implement zero trust technologies. There's been so much buzz around zero trust, but not many products are actually delivering on it yet. So we were excited to bring that out. And I agree with you as well. I think the NAC technology, the concepts are very easy, but again, very difficult to actually implement. When selecting a technology, I know one of the areas that GigaOm considers very carefully is kind of where where a vendor is investing for the future. I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts around that and how that's reflected in the radar.
So that really has a lot to do with kind of everything on the radar, right? So how you're investing and how you're progressing through the market defines the color and size of your arrow, right? Like you guys are a fast mover. So not only do we see you continuing to invest, we tend to see people continuing to invest, but you're investing in the direction that we see the market demand pulling, right? And you're investing at a pace that has you, like I said, as a fast mover in the market, right? If you look at those that are kind of ice blue, right, when looking at what they're doing in the space and where they're investing and where they're spending their time, we're not seeing them continuing to keep up with the market demand. Right, so it's kind of a key piece of the radar. And then it also, a failure to invest moves you backwards, doesn't move you forward. A failure to invest also keeps you out of the leader circle. Additionally, it plays into that maturity versus innovation scale that we talked about earlier, right? Which is not just how much you expect in investing and are you investing in the way the market expects, right? But then within your investments, where are you concentrating? And this is a really good place to kind of have that conversation around maturing a platform versus kind of the rapid change and innovation. And you guys have done a really good job, as I would expect, of balancing an evolutionary platform while adding new features, right, that continue to bring innovation in a platform without some of the disruption that we often see in innovation.
Looking at the radar, obviously there's some other vendors listed there, and many of the ones that are listed are more traditional premise patch management solutions versus Syxsense that's a cloud native platform, right? We run in the cloud, although we can patch endpoints whether they're on premise, someone's home with home working now, or in the cloud. I'm intrigued to hear kind of what your thoughts are on how the shift to the cloud is impacting buying decisions with enterprises today.
Well, I think there's two different components to a shift to the cloud. I think there's kind of the generalized shift to the cloud, where what I'm looking for in kind of my decision framework is how much of the product, how much do I need the product to be very specifically customized for me, right? Because SaaS, I have a little bit of configuration options, but I don't have a ton of customization options, right? I kind of run the same code everybody else does. And then I look at technical capabilities, right? How much of the technical capability do I need to own versus how much of the technical capability can I give up? How much kind of proprietary or tribal knowledge is required, And then I look at the individual, and so those are things that are really good to put in the cloud, really good to run as kind of SaaS products. And how complex is it to keep the infrastructure itself running is also kind of an indicator, right? It's kind of maybe the third wheel to that particular chart. And then when I look at things like patch management, having the ability to run it from the cloud and taking advantage of a globally deployed cloud model when I'm likely to continue to have a significant portion of the devices that I need patched to be a little more dispersed than my own network is a huge advantage, right? Additionally, I don't need to own the patch management infrastructure. Like there's no piece of that I actually need to own. What I need to own is the configuration and the integrations, which are easy to do within SaaS, right? And so it's the perfect kind of core IT tool to move to SaaS to lower my overhead and still give me all the benefits and really force me to focus on the places where my business does benefit rather than the care and feeding of more infrastructure. So I like that it's SaaS. That would be a big kind of push for me.
Howard, we hear from a lot of customers that one of their kind of key decision criteria when evaluating patch management technologies is patch coverage. So not just the ability to patch Microsoft platforms, but that ability to patch Mac or Linux devices. We see a lot of Linux devices now, especially in the data center and the servers. Intrigued, do you have any thoughts there? Maybe even third-party applications. It's another area we hear a lot about.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I would say like Windows is pretty table stakes, right? You're not going to get me. I won't show up to the meeting if you don't patch my Linux systems. And you kind of have to, right? That's where my Kubernetes runs. And that's where my modern apps run. And so that's a key component of my infrastructure. And I want you to patch as many of my devices, as much of my software as humanly possible, right? So what I'm really looking for is not how narrow is that boundary, but really how wide is that boundary and how extensible is that boundary, right? So kind of flexibility is really what I'm looking for there more than anything else.
Yeah, we've also found that our automation technology that we talked a little bit about earlier is also incredibly powerful when it comes to, for example, patching Linux servers. If you're running a patch cycle on a Linux server and at the end of the cycle that needs to be rebooted, well, making a decision around whether a server can be rebooted during the business hours or during the evening when perhaps you're processing transactions. A lot of decisions need to be made that could impact the business. Again, that power of the automation system is really helps a lot of our customers when it comes to automating their patch management cycles.
Yeah, it's a really good place for automation and AI to kind of take a hand, right? Manually managing the reboot cycles and kind of staggering those so that the disruption is as minimal as possible, and with a goal of being not noticed by the business, regardless of when you run it, is important. But also, you leveraging AI to say, hey, we can do a little bit of inspection, give you a little bit of advice, so it's not a static schedule, but rather a little bit more dynamic as you move through things is an incredibly brilliant kind of feature upgrade.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, I know we've had a few questions coming in from our audience, so I'm gonna see if we can address a few of those.
We did get some questions in the chat, actually. The first one says, what are some good practices for handling 0-day alerts?
So to start with, 0 days are never going to be less common than they are today, right? And so beyond patch management, start with architecture. It's why zero trust is so important as a philosophy, right? Zero trust says, I trust nothing, I trust no one. And so we need to start architecting our systems, we need to start architecting our software, we need to start architecting our networks to support 0 day. sorry, just to support zero trust, which is really, like, if you just think about it as reducing the potential blast radius, you're in a far better position. And then leverage the hell out of your patch management. And I'll let Ashley take over here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the majority of breaches that occur today, right, are from patches that have been around for a long time. So you just start by making sure that you've patched what's out there. Is a great start. And the zero trust, the 0 day vulnerabilities obviously are a great concern, but it does take time for them to actually be used as a entry point for a breach. So you tend to have a short period of time to react to a 0 day vulnerability and close down the vulnerability. We find that even if a patch doesn't yet exist for the 0 day vulnerability, that there are ways to make configuration changes on the endpoints to secure them. And again, that's where the automation technologies like Syxsense can really assist. A good example, I think, over the summer last year, right, was the print spooler one that Microsoft had. And although it took them a little while to come out with a patch for that vulnerability, we were able to actually leverage our automation engine to actually make the security changes to lock down the endpoints and secure them until a patch was released.
Yeah, there's a 0 day that was just released today for Fortinet that, is another one, right?
Yep.
Part of managing your 0 days is also managing the kind of expectation around that blast radius, like what else has to be compromised, what else has to occur for that to be compromised. And so I think some prioritization becomes really important. My firewalls are probably a higher priority than, let's say, printers. Maybe not by much, right? But maybe it's a first, second, same day. But I think it is really important to understand kind of what is the specifics of the 0 day that allows you to figure out, exactly when and how you should focus on them.
Great. Any more questions?
We do have another question here. It says, my company has decided to continue operating with a hybrid work model. Is there anything we should be paying attention to in the report or looking at products?
Yeah, so we do have an evaluation criteria for remote devices. So I would really pay attention to that. Additionally, really take a look at how do you plan on deploying your patches and where are your users, right? If you're a smaller mid-sized company where everyone's centrally located around a series of offices, that's going to be a different decision criteria than you have a globally dispersed workforce, right? And a lot of us became globally dispersed, right? A lot of us, especially me as a leader, I started looking at, instead of hiring within 22 minutes of an office being ideal, it was within 3 time zones of the work that became ideal, right? And that adds additional complexity to patching. Patching simply takes longer if it's got to come from my data center. And so think about what makes logical sense for you and for your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. You actually bring up a really interesting point there, Howard, because companies have started hiring globally now since the pandemic because more people are used to working remotely. And that brings a whole new set of challenges as well, because you've got to deal with operating systems and applications that may not be in English. Any thoughts or comments on that?
I mean, yeah, I'm less concerned about the multi-language support, which again I think becomes a key criteria for organizations where that's a challenge, as I am. We talked just a second ago about 0 days, right? If I've got a fully dispersed workforce versus a fully in-house workforce, my main concern, my tier 1, is likely to be those things that protect my edge. But when my edge is 10,000 deployed workstations, right, it's going to change my focus because I can't trust any of their equipment. I can't trust any of their firewalls. I can't trust any of their wireless equipment. I can't trust their network at all, right? And so it changes my focus. The more dispersed my organization is, the more dispersed my workforce is, the more complex that becomes in particular. And then, yes, absolutely, right? Language is the is a key criteria, of kind of managing that. And you don't really want to make mistakes with language because you tend to tick people off pretty bad.
Well, what we found is that patches that were designed for an English operating system don't necessarily work on a French or a German one. So Microsoft's done a better job at addressing that recently, but certainly some of the third-party patches, that's not the case. I think one of the other interesting challenges that we've noticed and are actually addressed in our technology is when it comes to time zones. We have a concept of being able to set up maintenance windows so that our customers can actually automatically patch devices overnight and then reboot those devices. The patch time of in California here on Pacific time, if that patch window closes at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, that East Coast, that's already 8 a.m. in the morning, East Coast, or in Europe, it's the middle of the day. And if you're rebooting devices based on some central time zone, you could be causing a lot of problems. So, for us, we put a lot of effort into making our technology actually time zone aware of the endpoint and making decisions about whether you should reboot the endpoints during the time zone of the endpoint itself. Do we have any other questions?
I think those are all the questions we have today. So thank you so much for joining us today. To download the report, you can use the QR code you see here, and feel free to contact us using the information on the screen if you'd like to learn more. Thank you again, and have a great day.